What is the future of cash and of digital currency? Well, joining me to discuss is Max Keiser, host of the Keiser Report. Thanks for coming into the studio with me.
Oh, Lindsay, my pleasure.
Excellent. Now, in a proposal, we talked about it earlier, the EU wrote they wanted to eliminate some notes in circulation in order to fight terrorism. What do you say to that sort of an explanation?
Well, it's a huge topic, Lindsay, because first of all, the banks are being disintermediated out of existence with the presence of this new fintech. That's point number one. Point number two, I think, is that, look, daily Forex market, it's a $5 trillion per day market. Facebook even captures 1% of this market. That's a $50 billion piece of change. It's an excellent target to go for. And then on the privacy issues, well, fortunately, we have things like Bitcoin that was invented to take on the central banks and to take on the central authorities, and it's hitting new all-time highs concurrently with this story, and I don't think that's an accident.
What do you say to, for instance, India's government demonetized the its market of corruption? It caused a lot of chaos. You know, put that situation on the EU. I mean, it's encroaching. What do you think the reaction would be to that sort of a thing?
Who's causing the chaos? The biggest drug underwriter are the big banks, HSBC and others, underwriting huge financial terrorism, underwriting the Mexican drug cartel, billions of dollars worth of money laundering for drug cartels. That's the biggest problem you have in the drug business are these big banks like HSBC and others. So they're the crooks. The alternative to that, hopefully, will put those guys out of business. As far as India goes, total mismanagement. You see what happens when a centralized government comes into force and they try to manage the currency and manage the economy from a central place, a central authority. All chaos breaks loose. So this is a country, India, that's ripe for, as a matter of fact, a good friend of ours at Unicoin, biggest Bitcoin exchange in India right now, is growing like a weed because the need for doing something outside of the centralized authority is strong.
Well, Bitcoin's had a wild few months. What do you think of where it's headed now? Because of, you know, a direct result is drawn to, you know, capital reforms and things like that.
Bitcoin has been a paragon of stability in some of these other currencies.
I know you're a huge fan of it, so go take it away.
Against the ruble. It's been one of the most, you know, stable currencies out there. Venezuela, where there's huge Bitcoin adoption because that economy is going into free fall. I've been trying to get the people in Greece to adopt a cryptocurrency to do battle with the EU. But, you know, the stability of Bitcoin is increasing. It's becoming less volatile. The adoption is increasing. It's being used more and more. It's proven itself as a reserve currency. I think the big trend we'll see in 2016, 2017 will be the central banks, actually, and other money centers trying to build Bitcoin positions as a storehouse of value along with their gold position. I would love to see Russian add to their gold position, start nibbling away at Bitcoin in their strategic reserves. That would blow people's mind. It's an absolute stunner of a decision. It would make perfect sense. They're buying gold aggressively. They should nibble away a little bit at Bitcoin as well.
How likely do you think that is, though?
I've been lobbying. Look, when my show, I take sole responsibility for lobbying and pushing the Kremlin to buy gold these past 5 years, and they've done nothing but buy gold. They watched the Keiser report. Well, of course, that's why they've been buying gold. So why would they buy Bitcoin? Get with it, Kremlin. Buy some Bitcoin.
What do you think about, you know, for instance, Germans, on the whole, like to use cash? How do you speak to that? We talk about decentralization, people wanting their hands on bills. A lot of governments are cutting things like $100 bills and things like that. They're going smaller. It's a privacy issue. If they want to hide that money under a mattress, they should be able to hide that money under a mattress. So what do you say to people who say, no, I want my cash?
It is a privacy issue. It's definitely a privacy issue and a free speech issue, and Germans are definitely more into cash than credit. And this is about individual economic sovereignty. And I believe that people should have the option to carry cash and have the anonymous qualities of cash. By giving centralized authorities total control of our financial well-being is a complete repudiation of all that we hold sacred in a democracy here in Washington, D.C.
Let's talk about former Prime Minister Tony Blair and Brexit.
Let me get my air sickness bag. I put it here somewhere.
Oh, come on.
I feel nausea. Bad. I feel waves of nausea coming on. Where?
That's it. Turn in your passport.
Go ahead.
Okay, former Prime Minister.
What's the question? I'll hold on to this table for... Yes, continue.
Give him his own piece in the show, please. Former Prime Minister Tony Blair and Brexit. He said Brits who voted Remain should rise up and stop Article 50 from being triggered in order to put off or block Brexit. His comments, how do you interpret them? Helpful, hurtful, any effect? What are you thinking when you hear comments like that?
Well, I think Tony Blair is the consummate opportunist, and as indicated by my histrionics, I think he's been a disaster. However, having said that, in this particular instance, he has an interesting point. Brexit is actually going to be highly detrimental to the UK. They go from being part of the biggest trading bloc in the world to being essentially an afterthought, an appendage. It's just a tip of a big trading bloc. And I don't think it's going to work out for them. Their economy will shrink by at least 25% as a result of Brexit. And they're already starting to see that. GDP is already starting to shrink in the UK. And I think this will shock a lot of people. The referendum was sold to appeal to bigots. And as a result, bigots voted to get out of the EU. But economically, it makes no sense. We're already starting to see inflation creep into that economy. So wages will not go up. The jobs will not come. There's going to be no manufacturing renaissance in tea-drinking Britain that likes to get drunk.
You mean the Winston Churchill Renaissance?
Absolutely, that's not going to happen. But the inflation will happen. So the real income of the average Brit will suffer dramatically under Brexit. It's the stupidest thing anyone could have voted. It's an own goal. It's moronic. They're going to rue the day they voted Brexit.
Well, you know, we both know that the UK is going to continue to tax the heck out of Brits anyway. So to go along with what you're saying about income, they could be absolutely strapped.
Well, just the inflation, you're already starting to see
yeah.
it. Real incomes are being destroyed because prices of stuff are going up, and the prices will continue to go up because the trade, the EU's already said, look, pay us 50 or 60 billion euros up front, and then we'll start to talk. The clock starts running for 2 years. Nothing will happen. They couldn't organize themselves how to get out of a wet paper bag if 50 of them, you know. It's not a place that you want them to rely on their ability to organize. That's just not the place to do it.
So you don't buy Theresa May's threat, thinly veiled threat, that it would be detrimental to the EU to come out with any Brexit rules that aren't friendly to the UK.
She has no leverage. What's her leverage? The GDP of the UK versus the EU is maybe 4%, whereas the GDP percentage of trade that the UK does with the EU is like 17, 18, 19%. It's 5 times greater. The EU could basically play games with the UK all day long, and they're going to lose at most 3 or 4% of GDP across the board, and they're willing to sacrifice that to just get rid of this little pit bull, you know, biting their ankles.
English bulldog.
Yeah, English bulldog, English pit bulldog, you know, biting at their ankles. It's not worth it. Just get rid of them. Dump the UK and be done with them.
You mean sink the island, perhaps?
It's a penal colony in the middle of the North Atlantic that lives under a rain cloud. Nobody's going to miss it. From Marmite-worshipping people who are abusive toward their relationship with alcohol. No one's going to miss it if they just get rid of the UK completely.
To our British viewers out there.
To that extent, Tony Blair has a point. Okay, Tony, you got a point.
Wow, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
To our British viewers out there, Max does not apologize for that. Just want to put that out there. Thank you so much, Max Keiser, host of the Keiser Report. Thanks for coming into the studio.
My pleasure.